Okay, so as I was saying, post-secondary transition questions come up a lot, and the education committee felt like this was a topic that deserved a full block of time. So we've invited panelists tonight who have a variety of expertise in post-secondary transition. I'm going to introduce each of them before they speak. We have first up is Audrey Vernick. Audrey's first son, Bennett, had the right hemisphere of his brain removed at age 2 to stop catastrophic epilepsy caused by stroke before birth. Today, he is seizure-free and attending college at Cal State East Bay. However, the path to get him to an appropriate education was excruciating. And this experience drove Audrey to fully understand the IEP process and her son's rights, and eventually to become a full-time parent advocate. Audrey is now the Director of Patient and Family Advocacy for the Pediatric Epilepsy Surgery Alliance, helping patients and their families access medical, educational, vocational transition, and community living services and supports across the lifespan. She also coordinates PACE's evidence-based support programs and caregivers of children who are considering brain surgery for epilepsy, as well as their sibling support. And I just realized I didn't do any housekeeping, so I'm going to do it now. If everyone would please remain muted and check, even if you think you're muted, because there's been some background noise, that would be great. And we're going to do all the panel presentations, and then we're going to do a Q&A. So you can post your questions to the chat, or you can use the raise your hand icon, and I'll remind you when we get there. Okay, those are the only two housekeeping items. So without further ado, Audrey, you're up and you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, did you make me co-host so I can do that?
Let
me see. Let's see if this works.
Everybody can share.
Everybody.
Okay, great. All right, I don't know why it's not loading. Hang on, there we go. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. This is my absolute favorite topic. As Sherry said, my son had a stroke in utero and then had epilepsy and had half his brain removed. So he has had every box on the IEP checked. And I really had to become an expert in order to help him get the education that he needed. And over the past 10 years or so, I've really done a deep dive on transition, both because my own son was going through it and also for my work. And I'm hoping that today I can teach you some of what I know now and what I wish I had known then. So here we go. So as I began to research transition over the past 10 years, I realized that it's sort of the dirty secret of special education. We spent all these years trying to build these perfect IEPs for our children you can have the most beautiful IEP in elementary school and all the right services in middle school. But if you get to high school and the transition plan is not appropriate, it's not providing what's really needed, then all of that previous work and effort was wasted. Transition's always the most important part of that child's IEP, even though it's at the end. We think it's like, oh, we're just crossing the finish line at graduation or aging out, but it's so much more than that. It's everything that we prepare our children for. It's the reason the child has an IEP to begin with. So let's look at what the law says. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an advocate and a patient advocate, but I love the law is very specific. So I always like to refer back to it. If you look at what the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act says, which is this is from the preamble, they say that Congress said that disability is a natural part of the human experience. Disability does not diminish the right of individuals to participate in or contribute to society. And improving the educational results for children with disabilities is an essential element of our national policy ensuring equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency. So I think when you think about what is full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency in the school setting, well, it's not. They're talking about what happens after your child leaves. That's the whole purpose of this work that we do to prepare an IEP. And the other thing that I think is really important about what this statement says, it doesn't say some students. It says all the students with an IEP should have this access to this. So we're thinking about what is transition. I get that question a lot. What is it? There's a lot of different transitions in our kids' lives. That you could be transitioning from kindergarten to elementary school, or from elementary to middle, or middle to high, et cetera. But what we're talking about today is the transition from IDEA. So basically from kindergarten through perhaps age 22 into the adult world. That after school or post-secondary part is what we're referring to today. And it can be a really long process. It could take another 20 years to fully transition your now adult child to be really ready for independent adulthood because of their disabilities. But regardless of what their disability is, all of our kids are going to become adults at some point. And so the idea is to start looking ahead at your child's future life, set life goals, and decide what supports and services are needed for them to help them be successful. None of us has a crystal ball. I did not know all the answers for my son, who's now 19 and just finished his first year of college, and he passed almost all of his classes this year. I didn't know what he was going to do. I didn't know that he was going to college when he was 10, right, or younger. Did I want him to? Yes. I had that goal in mind. I didn't know if he could. He has half a brain. He's got every single disability you can have by half: cerebral palsy, vision, hearing, et cetera. So how is this going to work? I didn't know, but I had the goal in mind, and every year we would revisit the big picture goals and readjust. My personal experience was that I was looking at what he was going to need to be independent in post-secondary life. And he needed both academic and functional skills training in order to meet those life goals. But the school was not willing to offer anything other than academics for him. They were like, we're working on a diploma. That's all we need to do, which I've learned over the way is not actually the case. They need to be providing academic and functional supports throughout their transition years, all the way through high school or their transition program. So you, as parents, though, what you're thinking about is, what is my child going to need? If they're going to college, what will they need? If they're going to need, or do they need support to keep a job or get a job, et cetera? So whatever it is that they need, that is a support, is that a support you're providing? If not, what agency is providing it? Or is there training that could be put in place so the child doesn't need the supports once they're adults? The other really important thing to remember is that the law says that the main purpose of IDEA, their stated purpose, is to ensure that children with disabilities are prepared to lead productive and independent lives to the maximum extent possible. And again, they don't say some students, they say students with disabilities, right? And they have to be looking at further education, independent living, and employment when we get into transition age. We have to ensure, the IDEA also says we have to ensure the effectiveness of education for students with disability. So part of having an effective education is to make sure that the students have the skills and the knowledge and the ability to function outside of school. A question I get a lot is, when should I start thinking about transition? I don't think kindergarten is too young to start thinking about transition. I work in the epilepsy surgery world. There's a lot of families I work with whose children have also had a hemispherectomy. There can be a lot of presumption, well, your child has half a brain, they're never going to do X. And so what I say is at a young age, start thinking about what are realistic goals for your child and start working towards them. If you've been counseled off of a diploma track, but you really feel like your child has the skills to attempt college, then they should be on a diploma track, right? And you have to think about that early enough to make it a reality. You can't decide in the middle of high school. Some things are changing in California for kind of alternate access to a diploma, but it's better to start early. The law says that the transition IEP, which is an IEP with transition goals based on an age-appropriate transition assessment, has to be in place by the student's 16th birthday. So that means if you're going to have that in place by the 16th birthday, you really need to start this process of planning earlier, right? At least by 15, because it's going to take time to do evaluations and all of that. You don't want to wait so long that you can't make any changes. I know for me, I worked on a lot of these skills for my son throughout his lifespan. I recognized early on, oh, he's going to need a lot of support with, say, social skills, right? He's got a real big challenge with that. He actually has autism, and recognizing the things he was going to need support with. The other thing is to remember is that Transition can take place throughout the lifespan. So I said earlier that it might take 20 years, like it took 20 years to get to post-secondary school, right? And then maybe it's another 20 years to really prepare your kid for their adult life independently. My son is in college now, but he has a supported adulthood. So I provide a lot of support for him. But I built up to that and I recognized what he was going to need so that I could have a plan in place for him once he aged out of school or graduated. Literature, all the research on transition, so much of it talks about how children with disabilities are often described as falling off a cliff once they leave high school due to the failure of planning and implementing effective transition plans. So the only way you can plan and implement an effective transition plan is if you set goals, know what your rights are, and start asking for it. The more severe the disability, the more severe the fall. But I'll also say that the more severe the disability, the more paralyzed I see parents being, because you feel like you have a 500-pound elephant on you and you just can't even fathom what to do. You have to just start moving one toe at a time, because you're never going to get that elephant off if you don't take action. So chip away, taking one step at a time. What I see a lot that is that transition planning is an afterthought. So those of you who already have a transition plan or an ITP, individualized transition plan, it's usually the last 3 pages of the IEP. My son's IEP was 100 pages long. Tear those last 3 pages off and put them at the top and tell the team, let's start with this. At transition age, the entire focus should be transition. So waiting until the end to talk about what is central to that IEP at transition age, it seems like that's not the right approach. We need to talk about transition first, because that is what's central to what's happening with your child at transition age, and you have to prioritize it and make plans. Another thing to think about, which you can do as a parent anytime throughout your child's, really from age 3, 5, 10, whatever age it is to start thinking about self-determination. This is an essential skill for the successful transition to adulthood. And this is about believing in yourself and knowing that you're capable of and allowed to make your own decisions. This includes self-advocacy, self-awareness, and then in adulthood, we're looking at things like person-centered planning. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on these individual items. One thing that I see often is that families don't really understand what diploma their child is working towards. So I've had parents say to me, my child is on the honor roll, or my child is a straight A student in high school, but the child is in a special day class and is working on a certificate of completion. So graduating without a regular diploma is a major barrier to employment. You can't even get a job in most school districts as a janitor without a high school diploma. So if you're not aware of what diploma your child is working towards, you should be, or that should be a conversation you're having with the team. For my son, I wanted him to have the A to G diploma. I actually got pushback from the head of school in his junior year, saying he could not take the 2 extra classes he needed, Spanish 3 and Algebra 2, because she didn't think he could do it with his other load. But he did. He took 5 classes his senior year and he had a 3.5 GPA, and he went straight into a 4-year college. So he was able to do it, even though people who knew him well doubted that it was possible. But you need to be aware of what diploma your child is working on, discuss the graduation plan with your team, etc. If your child gets just a certificate of attendance, that, like I said, that can be a barrier in adult life. When you think about what is that diploma and what does it mean, we know, I'm sure you've all, maybe you haven't, but I'm an education junkie. So I've read the news that says that a lot of kids in our country graduate with a diploma, but they're illiterate, right? So just getting the diploma might not be enough as well. So how well should your child read, and how well should they be able to do math? So if you look at the WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, that law says that there's a basic literacy and numeracy level that is required to be considered employable. And that's English reading, writing, or computing skills at the 8th grade level, and the ability to compute or solve problems, read, write, or speak English at a level necessary to function on the job, in their family, or in society. So if that's not at least the basic floor that your team, your IEP team is working towards, then that would be a conversation that I would want to have. Some children are not able to reach these levels, and that's fine. That's their track, that's their trajectory, and there's other things that we would be doing to support them to have an independent and rich life. But if the student is capable and the team is not working towards at least the basic standard, that bare minimum of an 8th grade level of literacy and numeracy, then you need to have a conversation with your IEP team. The other thing to remember is if your child has a special healthcare need like diabetes or epilepsy or anything like that, in order to safely manage your own medications and nutrition, to read medical information on a website, to access doctor materials in a doctor's office, to have a conversation with a doctor, you need a 10th grade literacy level in speaking and reading. So it can be different depending on what the child's disability is. And in that, if the child had a medical disability, you might want to ask for more literacy instruction and more literacy support. This is a transition roadmap that I like. I'm just showing you the steps in the process. It's very similar to the regular IEP. So you have to remember the transition IEP is an IEP. But now the law says that you have to be focused on transition, but you're going to follow all the same steps. The only difference at transition aid is that now that transition assessment must be done annually, and which I'll talk about in a second. The parent and student must be notified and ideally prepared for the age of majority, meaning when they turn 18 and make their own decisions, and then graduation and aging out obviously don't happen in a regular IEP. I like to show this to remind us that in order to create a meaningful transition plan, in some ways we need to go back to the beginning, which is the assessments. So when we think about what is an age-appropriate transition assessment, it's going to look different for every student, but the law does say that an age-appropriate transition assessment has to be done in training, education, employment, and independent living if needed. I have yet to meet a child with an IEP who didn't need supports and independent living skills. Even a child with just an executive function disorder and nothing else probably needs some independent living skills, training and support because they can't find their way out of the grocery store or they can't organize their week to make it to things on time, etc. What does that assessment look like? Again, I don't know your children. I don't know what assessment they're going to need. For my son's initial transition assessment, we started in 8th grade. I requested to the team that we start earlier. The law says you can start earlier if the team agrees and if it's appropriate. And these are assessments that were all part of his triennials over the years. I won't say we did every assessment every single time, but he was assessed in all these areas over the years. You can combine your triennial with your transition assessments. I think that's a really great way to do it. One school said to a parent, well, we don't need to do a diagnosis of autism because it's on the IEP. He's already eligible for autism. When you go into the adult world, you need diagnostics. So it's really important that if there is a suspected disability, that the child is diagnosed in that area. It's a little tricky between eligibility and diagnosis, but I'm going to gloss over that right now in the interest of time. The other thing to remember is it's academic and functional. So the law says all throughout the IEP up to age 22, academic achievement and functional performance. It doesn't say for some students, it doesn't say for some years. Academic achievement and functional performance is what the school needs to be working on. So a student with a disability must have those academic and functional goals. And then by transition age, they also have to have measurable post-secondary goals, which Jan is going to cover. We want to make sure that these students are accessing not just the diploma, but that they have the ability to function in the world. I'm helping a family right now. Their son has just turned 26. He graduated from, I think, a high school in Berkeley with a diploma, has autism and executive function disorder, couldn't make it in college, can't keep a job, and is basically at home on the couch. So if you don't have that functional skills training in place or supports in place, that's what can end up happening. The diploma is not enough. And then the life skills track is also not enough if the child has academic potential and you're being pushed into a life skills class. The law says academic and functional, very important. The transition assessment has to include everything that any assessment under IDEA would include, which is formal and informal measures, interviews with the student and the parent and the teacher, situational assessments, etc. It's not different than a regular assessment. It's actually more than a regular assessment. This is all from IDEA of what a regular assessment must consist of, technically sound instruments, not using any single measure. So just be really careful if the school says we did a questionnaire, an interest inventory online, and then there's a KTA from a couple years ago, there's our comprehensive transition assessment. I don't think that meets the requirement of what a transition assessment needs to be. And remember, that's the foundation of the IEP, especially at transition age. Also, the report needs to have a summary of findings, any reports, assessments that you have done, and really important that they have recommendations, because if the report comes and says, well, the team will decide what's needed, but the report was done by an expert in a certain area, how will the rest of the team know? And most ethics boards are saying that the evaluator needs to provide recommendations, the National Association of School Psychologists, et cetera. If you disagree with the evaluation, you're entitled to an independent educational evaluation at district expense. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip that. Key thing to remember, key change at transition age, once they turn 16, the student is the center of the IEP process. They have to be invited to participate in every meeting. If they can't participate fully, they could write a letter, they could do a video, they could create a PowerPoint. There's lots and lots of ways, and it's also a great transition activity. And lots of other people can be at the meeting. Some of the people that you'd have normally, but then maybe some additional people like the outside agency representatives must be invited to your IEP meeting by your school, right? It's not the parent's responsibility. The school has to invite the outside agencies that will be working with the child in adulthood. When we're thinking about what are some post-school activities that your child might be doing, that's where you start to brainstorm and collaborate with your team and think, well, what is it really that my child is going to be doing? Are they going to college? Are they going to do a vocational education? Are they going to be accessing adult services? What's their independent living and community participation going to be like, regardless of their level of disability? We want to make sure they have community participation and friendship. It's so important. Another key quote from the IDEA is that the law says that the transition services are a coordinated set of activities for a student with a disability. It has to be in a results-oriented process. It has to be focused on improving academic and functional achievement, and it's facilitating the movement from school to post-school activities. I always say to families, if you were going to print out one piece of the IDEA to bring with you to your transition IEP meetings, this is it. This is the language. And ask yourself, when you leave that IEP and you look at it, is this a coordinated set of activities?
2 minutes, Audrey.
Thank you. I'm not going to go through this, but here are some activities. Depending on your child, if they have more severe needs or different needs, you might be looking at some different activities. When you think about how to combine the transition and IEP requirements, you want to make sure that all the pieces are there in place. I think you're going to have access to these slides afterwards. Just like a regular IEP, there needs to be progress monitoring. You want to review annually. And again, you have an annual assessment at transition age. Annual transition assessment is what the federal law says. So graduation is just the beginning. It's not the end. Here are my key takeaways. Don't wait to start learning about transition and to start planning for transition, even if your child is 5. Evaluations and assessments are key. They're the foundation of the IEP. I'm going to let Jan talk about goals. I'm sure she's going to talk about the difference between annual and measurable post-secondary goals and that they're student-centered. All those goals and services are needed in employment, further education, and independent living if appropriate. But again, I feel like they're always appropriate. The other thing the law says is that you have to consider the student's stated strengths, preferences, and interests now. So it's not just about what you think the child should do, but do they want to do it? Very important. And then make sure those outside agencies are invited. I know they're going to be here tonight on the panel, as they will be providing the ongoing services throughout high school and then into adulthood. Thank you so much. And I will be here for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Okay, so I am going to get ready to share my screen. And next we have, okay, hold on a second. So many pieces. Okay. So next, our next speaker is Jan Johnston Taylor. Jan is the CEO and founder of Evo Libre Consulting. After 20 years as a middle-level manager in high tech, Jan founded Evo Libre in 2007 after completing her master's in counseling psychology. Her goal was simple: to provide targeted services for neurodiverse youth and adults to help them make their way in the neurotypical world. Now encompassing a variety of services, including therapy, career and job development and coaching, academic success and executive functioning coaching, independent living and social skills training. Evo Libre serves individual clients, school districts as a non-public agency, Department of Rehab consumers and corporations, including Wells Fargo, Salesforce, F5 and LinkedIn. Evo Libre remains the first and only multidisciplinary agency of its kind in the US. And I believe that I am the sharing the slides. So let's get that going. Right, Jen, I'm sharing your slides.
I
Or did you want to?
I can do it.
Okay,
That would be fine.
that would be better.
Yeah, let me get to that. Hang on just a second. And just as a clerical point here, I think we had a little bit of a confusion over who was covering what. So my apologies. Audrey's presentation was phenomenal, and it covered some of the things that I was planning on covering. So, oh, that's okay. That's all right. You know what? We're flexible. We know.
Well,
how-
I think this is information that you can't say enough times to
I
folks.
totally agree. And I was sitting here, nodding vehemently to everything that she was saying.
And Jan,
now-
if you cover everything she said you're going to cover, we can talk about it in the Q&A.
Right. Now, can everybody see my screen? That does not sound good. Can people see it?
Yes. Yes, but I don't think you're in presentation mode. I
That's
think you might be in speaker mode.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'll tell you what, we're gonna fake it and we're just gonna go like this. How's
In the upper, oh, it's not letting you do it.
No, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I think this is good enough for now. So what we're talking about, obviously, is transition and planning for our students. Now, mine is a little bit different here in that we're focusing specifically on those students who are going to be graduating with a diploma. But as Audrey said, it's really important to be aware of sort of the trickery that some school districts will play, sadly. And that is, they may switch at the last moment, or they may say, no, we think he can or she can graduate with a diploma when they still have some major outstanding needs. Others are like, no, we think that probably a certificate of completion is good enough. And it is true, you can't get a job in many places with just a certificate. However, you can go to a community college if the student is able. And the minute you earn a new certificate or an associate's degree, it obviates anything that happened before. Just a little bit of FYI for you. So, preparing for the great beyond. So, transition planning must, and you heard this before, at age 16, no later. And it really should, I agree, happen before that. It's interesting, the law does not specify that it's only for kids with an IEP or a 504. I haven't had time to dig into that, but it could be that that's an important thing to note for anybody who's got a student at a charter school. We've run into a couple very interesting scenarios about who's responsible for 18 to 22 services for kids who are at a public charter and whose school does not have 18 to 22 programming. Interesting. That, as you heard before from Audrey, it must be a coordinated set of activities that are results oriented, designed to improve academic and functional achievement, and taking into account the student's strengths, preferences, and interests. Now, as Audrey had also mentioned, many high schools believe that their job is done just by graduating the student. By hitting 18 and giving them a piece of paper, they think their work is done. And what we're seeing is a lot of kids who are very ill prepared for whatever comes next, and mainly because the school district didn't really do their job. So what this typically means in many school districts, and I've worked with, oh gosh, probably 60 school districts in California now, it usually means some kind of career assessment. As Audrey had mentioned, it's often just a happy kind of, what color's your parachute? What would you like to do? It tends to be informal in terms of what kind of career a person might be interested in, with little follow-up, except they may give them a new career assessment, a form to fill out every year. The problem also, even if they're using Naviance or one of the online programs, is that there's no career counselor there. Now, it is true, by training, I am a career counselor, but I have a lot of kids who have worked really hard, 7, 8, 9 years to get through a bachelor's degree in history, and then think they're going to be able to go out and get a job, and they can't. So we really want to have those more pragmatic conversations earlier on. You're really interested in history. What kind of job would you like, right? Not just the interest, but how does that interest follow into a profession? Schools typically encourage students to research colleges, and that's actually what it says in most ITPs. So the kid at some point in their resource class has some extra time and somebody pokes them and said, go look at your local community college and see what's interesting. Well, again, we are lucky. We have in the Bay Area 13 community colleges, but they're all different. They all have different programming. Oftentimes, the most appropriate programming for a student is not at their nearby community college. So again, we need to have somebody leading this discussion, not just letting kids kind of figure it out on their own and or with their parents, because you are also not career professionals. You're also not specialists in which community colleges have which program. And again, there's very little follow-up. I've done 7 IEEs in the last couple months, and none of them had any good information in them about what college the student was going to go to and what their field of study was. It was just complete hodgepodge. And these are kids who are graduating. And if we can, we like kids to have a little exposure to job applications and interviews while they're still in high school. That doesn't always happen. I think, to the extent possible, if kids can volunteer or get a really part-time job while they're in high school, so much the better. We call all of this, what school districts frequently are doing, is checkbox transition planning. There is a page on the ITP that says, did you do this, 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 and this? And school districts check, 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 check. But there's very little that's coordinated, not integrated, not comprehensive. One case that we just worked on, this is a kid who a very late diagnosis of autism, actually in his junior year. His parents have been begging for an assessment since 2nd grade. He's graduating here in a week, and he had no plan. He had virtually no plan. And what it came down to was his resource teacher, his special ed teacher, was going off in one direction, and his construction teacher, God bless him, had found a program for him, but he didn't know he was supposed to be talking to the transition team. So you saw these 2 different paths emerging. Nobody was talking to anybody, and the kid was completely confused. So what should a transition plan include? First off, it's got to understand the student, what their present level of performance is, and what the specific gaps that exist. For example, academics. You heard Audrey saying, she's absolutely right. Grade level equivalency for work. And this is not just WIOA, this is actually the Bureau of Labor who came up with these numbers. Bureau of Labor says you must have literacy and numeracy at 8th grade for work in the United States. We believe that you need to have 10th grade for college. Part of the reason for this is, although there's a lot of kids who graduate with a whole lot lower than 10th grade. Most of you are probably unaware that this little thing called AB 705 passed last year. And what this did was remove all remediation classes from California colleges. So if you have a kid who graduates with 5th grade English, thinking that, oh, well, they can just take the air quote bonehead remedial English until they're ready for college level English, everybody's going to be very unhappy to find out that class doesn't exist anymore. Some community colleges have had, added sort of this bolt-on class that goes with the first level of English, but that class also only lasts 1 quarter or 1 semester, depending on the school. So if you have a gap between, say, 5th grade and 12th grade, 7 years, great, you're gonna catch up in 1 term, 1 semester? I don't think so. So we're seeing that gap. School districts are unaware in many places about AB 705. I've had 4 out of the 7 that I've done so far this year had 3rd and 4th grade literacy and numeracy, and they were getting a diploma. It's crazy. Independent living skills, executive functioning, this is so key. Self-care, self-advocacy, the ability to get from point A to point B independently. Reasonable handwriting and typing skills. These are also things that we're not really testing. I've asked many times, does the student have a signature? How many words per minute can they type? And the transition teams are looking at me like I'm crazy, yet these are the skills that people need out in the real world. Social and emotional skills, including the ability to self-regulate and self-advocate appropriately. So self-regulate, of course, is the ability to kind of keep yourself calm when you're stressed. Self-advocate is super important. There's a huge cliff, to use that word again, between what happens in high school and what happens in a college environment, and also employment, in that we're shifting from IDEA to ADA. And parents and students are often mortified to find out how many of the accommodations they receive in high school are not available in, certainly not in the workplace, but also in college. So it's a much more streamlined list of the types of accommodations you can receive. And it's really important that as we're getting kids through high school, if nothing else, we're paying attention to the fact that some of the things that our students are getting in the classroom, they will not get in college. We see a lot of kids who drop out of college because of this. They can't manage themselves. They can't self-advocate, and they don't know how to get help. And executive functioning skills sufficient to manage whatever workload is anticipated. All of that is really key. Kids, and I'm guilty of this too, here in the Bay Area, we tend, because it's reinforced by the school districts, we tend to over or micromanage our kids every second, every appointment, every homework assignment. We remind them to log into their system to check. We do this, we do this. I think what a lot of parents, I certainly didn't realize this with my first kid, is we're replacing the kids' prefrontal cortex. We are managing school for them. We're not going to be able to do that nearly as effectively, if at all, once they get into post-secondary. And all of this, we need to remediate any of the missing skills. Any weakness in this, we have, say, from age 16 to 18, not very much time to really close that gap. So here's the reality check. A transition plan should include a career or field of study if the kid is planning on going into college, definitely a field of study. And if they're going into work, what is it exactly they want to do? I see so many ITPs that say, the transition plan is student will get a job, student will live at home. It's just kind of brushing everything off. We really have to be more granular, really specific. Can you imagine if you're going to go off on a 50-year trip and you said, yeah, I'm going to go someplace, I don't know where. And that's really what we're doing by not having the specificity. We should also be able to name the specific college or training program. And if we're saying they're going to go to the local, say, DVC, does DVC have the program that this student is interested in? Actually, DVC is a bad choice because they have so many great things, but there are a lot of other smaller community colleges that can't support the student. Market analysis. I know this sounds kind of crazy, but I get kids who want to go into a line of work that I just have to scratch my head, because there are virtually no jobs in that career at all. especially if you want to stay in the Bay Area. One of the most popular oddballs, if you would, is in transportation, specifically in trains. And most of the people who work on trains, who design trains, who work for the large train companies are in the Midwest. And so if your child doesn't want to move to Wisconsin, then we may have a problem unless they're willing to work at BART. Straight to work. So in what field, what training is needed? So if it says, you know, my daughter's going to go get a job, I need to know what field. I need to know what training is required. Do they have the requisite skills? Are there accommodations needed for that person to do the job, for the student to do the job? Do we know that they can get those accommodations? Are they considered reasonable accommodations? And can the individual earn enough income to live independently? Now, that's a real big question and tricky one, especially in the Bay Area, because it's hella expensive to live here, right? So if they are doing the job of their dreams and it is a reasonable goal for them, but they can't earn enough income, then the family has some interesting decisions to make. And I think it's really important that we're realistic about what this really looks like. I have a lot of parents who really want their kids to get a job, any job, and move out of the house. And we have to explain to parents, great, let's say they get a job at Safeway, and let's say they get really lucky and they get more than 21 hours a week. Most people at Safeway don't. Let's say they get 40 hours. We do the math with them and we explain to them they will not make enough income to live independently. And so we have to think a different way. So what else should it include is the how, right? Is the needed programming available locally and does it suit the student? So again, back to, are we going to DVC or are we going to another school? For kids who are interested in things that are more non-traditional, like I want to be a pilot and I don't want to join the Air Force. Where are we going to go to learn to be a pilot? How much is it going to cost? Is it realistic? You know, does the family have the financial wherewithal? Some of these programs are very expensive. How is the student going to get there? How are they going to get to school? How are they going to get to the workplace? Do they have transportation? Do they know how to use public transit? Is it reasonable? Or is it going to take 2.5, 3 hours each way every day of the week, which then becomes quite unreasonable for most young adults? And what specific ADA accommodations does the student need and how will they access them? What other support will the student need? Are they going to need tutoring, coaching for executive functioning and academic success? What else do we need to put in place? One of the other things, especially if the student is moving out of the area, we really need to think about having a therapist if the student has had therapy and they need that ongoing therapeutic intervention or therapeutic relationship. We need to get somebody for them out of state. Also, if they're on schedule, what is it? Schedule 1, Schedule 2 drugs like medication for ADHD, they need to have a psychiatrist in the same state where they're going to be located.
2 minutes
So,
left, Jan.
pardon me?
2 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So transition plan should be specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. Remember that, much like Audrey had her little cheats. This is my cheat. What is the student specifically going to do after high school? How will we know that the student is successful? Is the plan actionable? I mean, if anybody picked it up, would they know what to do with it? Is it realistic given this person's abilities and their desires, what they want to do, and what the family finances look like? Because we have to remember that. And is it time bound? Will we be done in time for graduation? So 12th grade transition plans are not transition ideas, not good thoughts about transition, and not busy work. The end goal is the student ready for what comes next? Perfect, right under the wire. I love it.
Thank you so much, Jan. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit because now we're going to talk about service, the provision of services. So we actually have 2 panelists that are going to be speaking together. Della Randolph who's the Regional Director of the Greater East Bay District of the California State Department of Rehabilitation, or DOR. That Greater East Bay District serves Contra Costa County, Alameda, and Solano County. And presenting with Della is Leslie Fuentes, who is the Regional Business Specialist for the DOR Greater East Bay. And Leslie started her career with the DOR in August of 2015, and both Leslie and Della are passionate about promoting diversity and inclusion for individuals with disabilities. And we're so lucky to have them because they have a lot to tell us about what can be accessed in post-secondary life. So take it away, Della and Leslie.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh, go ahead, Della.
I was just gonna say you're on deck with the PowerPoint, or are you gonna let Sherry run, or are you gonna run the PowerPoint?
Oh, I'm going to run the PowerPoint.
Okay, all right, take it away.
Give me 1 second. Are you seeing my notes or just the PowerPoint?
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
Perfect. So let me lower this down. Okay, so thank you for having us here today. So this is actually a great transition into what we're going to talk about, what happens after high school. So we are the Department of Rehabilitation. I'm going to go to my next slide. So the California Department of Rehabilitation administers the largest vocational rehabilitation program in the country. Vocational rehabilitation services are designed to help job seekers with disabilities obtain competitive employment in integrated work settings. So here at DOR, we work in partnership with not just our participants, get the screen out the way, but we also work with other stakeholders like Jan from Evo Libre to provide services and advocacy in pursuit of employment, independent living, and equality for all Californians with disabilities. So our fundamental belief is that people with disabilities can be fully integrated and highly productive community members and employees and colleagues. So today we are going to talk about the type of services that we provide. So we offer two types of services. We offer student services, which we consider our potential eligible services, our PE cases, and we offer employment services, which we consider our vocational rehabilitation services, our VR caseloads. So I'll go into more detail in the next few slides. So what is student services? So, we start working with the youth as young as 16 to start, talking about what happens after high school. So we provide students with disabilities the valuable skills to propel towards an independent and successful future. And we do that in many different ways. So we talk to the students about, exploring different career paths, talking to them about what their interests are. Our DOR student services, it helps them gain confidence by strengthening their communication skills. We've had students go through student services that, were a little shy at the beginning. And once we got them into the program, just talking to their peers, communicating with others, they were able to build those skills that they need after high school to be able to just, communicate with others and possibly get employment. It also helps them develop social skills for the workplace. And my favorite part of student services is the hands-on work experience that we can provide. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So some of the goals that we have with student services are the students to learn what happens after high school. Are they interested in going to college? Are they interested in possibly a training program? Do they want to learn about apprenticeship programs? We want to start, planting that seed at a young age about what they want to do once they're out of high school. We want to get them excited about different career paths, different opportunities, and we want them to be successful in whatever they decide to do after high school. So we try to provide all the tools necessary for that. So services are available to students who are 16 to 21 years old. They must be enrolled in an education program. So that includes homeschool and alternative high school programs. And they must have an IEP, a 504, or a disability. So if a student doesn't have an IEP and then they don't have a 504, but they have a disability, then we can still provide services. And so next, I'm going to cover a few of the services that we provide for student services and the type of workshops we provide. So there are 5 categories of services that we work with each student. There's job exploration and counseling. So in this phase, our team is working with the students to, talk about in-demand industries. So what type of jobs are out there? We try to assess them in talking about like local labor market information and try to identify a career path or what piques their interest. Under workplace readiness, we do activities like learning communication and interpersonal skills, sorry about that. We talk about financial literacy. We have work incentive planners that can work with our students and parents so they can learn, if they are an SSI, how that can change, so how it can be affected or not affected. So we have work incentive planners that can work with our students. They will learn different type of job seeking skills. Now almost everything's done online. So we'll teach them how to navigate one of the websites where we would be searching for jobs, things like that. And we during this phase, so at workplace readiness, we want them to understand what employers are looking for, what type of expectations are out there. A year ago, we did it was an event for students, and we brought on 5 employers, and they did a panel discussion with the students, and the students were there to ask them questions about the type of job that they're trying to hire for, the type of skills that they're looking for, what should they put on their resume. So it was like an open forum for them to just talk to the employers in a safe space, and with they can ask any questions that they want. So we would do things like that with post workplace readiness training. There's also post-secondary counseling. So during post-secondary counseling, there's they can explore different type of academic and occupational trainings, and discuss different type of career paths with the counselors and service coordinators that work with the students. There's also self-advocacy, which is probably one of my favorites. I think it's really important for us to teach our youth how to advocate for themselves. So during this phase, they'll learn they'll learn about their rights and responsibilities. They'll learn how to request accommodations or services or support. They'll have peer mentoring. So in one of our locations, one of our DOR offices, we have one of our students that is working with other students. So she's doing, peer mentorship within our offices, and just teaching them everything that she learned when she went through our student services program. So self-advocacy is really important for our students, just so they can know their rights once they're out of high school and they're, I'm not necessarily on their own, but, just giving them the tools necessary so they can speak up for themselves. And last but not least is work-based learning experiences, which is my favorite because it's the one that I help the students the most with. And I have a whole slide that I'm going to go through. But with work-based learning, we go through, teaching the youth what it takes to find the job, to clock in, clock out, to fill out their timesheets, to learn a type of skill within certain fields. And let me go to the next slide because it's where I talk a little bit more about it. So student work experience. Work experience offers students the skills to gain confidence in the work world. Our DOR student services team works with the students to find a local work site, and our team supports them throughout the work experience. So there are many of us that are working with the students. I'm on the back end, so I'm approving the time cards, making sure that our students are being paid on time. I'm helping them with submitting time cards, any paperwork that's needed on our back end, teaching them how to use the system to be able to clock in and clock out and things like that. So I'm on the back end, but there's a lot of front end stuff that's being done by our staff. So we have counselors and student service coordinators that are really hands-on working with the students. They're taking them to different work sites. They are teaching them, how to communicate with their employer. So just pretty much anything that's needed. These are some of the work sites that we have our students placed in. So last year we had an opportunity with the Alameda County Fairgrounds. So they were open for a month and we had students working in one of the booths in that location. We can have students working at DOR offices, Ace Hardware, Berkeley Food Network, Antioch School District, Bookmark Bookstore. We've had students at the SF Marine Food Bank, McDonald's, and so on. So I won't go through the whole list, but what I do want to talk about the last one, Diamond, Equine, I don't know how to say the word, services. But this is a ranch in Oakland where the students can work with horses. And they have the option of not working directly with the horses and doing like all of the, cleaning or feeding, things like that. But that's one of our newest connections that we have. And I'm really excited about this one because we have a lot of students that want to work with animals. So, being able to have this connection with the horse ranch, I think is really great. Let's see. Now I want to talk a little bit about our employment services. So our employment services, which we call our VR caseload, we can provide services as that include career counseling and guidance, job search and placement assistance, education and training. So if someone wanted to go to a college or they wanted to do a training program, then we can support them in this service. We can talk about benefit planning, provide assistive technology, self-employment, and one of our newest services that we have is adult work experience. I do want to back up a little bit and clarify that, so student services are between the ages of 16 to 21, and they're for students with disabilities, so have to be enrolled in school. So those are like pre-services that we can provide. If a student is going to college and we're funding them, we're funding education and training, we can still provide student services in their plan. So every plan is individualized. So once you apply for or a student applies for services, then we'll discuss which route to go. Typically, if it's a student with a disability, we'll start them off as this with student services, and then we'll move them to our employment services, especially if they need specific things like funding for school. So I'm going to talk a little bit about adult work experience. This is one of our new services that we do have to offer. Sometimes someone may not have any work experience, or they're possibly moving into a career that they haven't done before, and they want to gain that experience before they actually start looking for a job in that field. So now we can provide adult work experience up to 300 hours per individual. And for student services, our work experience is 300 hours as well.
Hi, Leslie, 2 minutes.
Okay, so are you eligible? These are the questions that typically we ask to talk about eligibility. Do you have a disability? Do you want to work? Are you having trouble getting or keeping a job, and et cetera? So these are for our general services that we have to offer. if someone answers yes to all these questions, and typically, we recommend for them to apply so then they can speak to a counselor. And then how to apply. So we just recently updated our website. And so I provided the PowerPoint already, and I'll put the link into the chat. Because right when you click onto our website, this is the page that'll come up. You'll want to click get started. Then number 2, click on get started again. You'll see this page. It'll ask if you wanted to do student services or employment services. So in our case, we would want to do student services. You would scroll all the way down to the page, click request student services, and then it'll ask you to fill out some information. Once that information is filled out, it'll go to one of the local offices, and then a staff will reach out to make an appointment. And it works the same way with the employment services. We have offices all over the Bay Area. So we are part of the Greater East Bay District, which we cover Solano, Alameda, and Contra Costa. And we have offices all over. So Concord, Antioch, Richmond, Fremont, Berkeley, Oakland, and Fairfield. And connect with us. So I do have my email address and phone number on screen, as well as my regional director, Della Randolph's email. And we're all over social media. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We want to be able to be as accessible as possible. And we want to be able to reach the youth. So the youth is using social media. So we are definitely using social media as well. So we can be reached through any avenue. And next is questions.
We're not going to do questions yet. Thank you so much, Leslie and Della. And I have your slides in the materials that I'll be sharing at the end. So our last presenter is from Alacasta Center. So I have on deck Michael Pereira. He's the executive director of Alacasta Centers, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that provides services for school-age students and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Alacasta currently operates 2 after-school programs in Berkeley and Alameda, the Adult Transition Program for Berkeley Unified School District, and an adult community training program. Michael has been a professional in the special needs, special education community for over 20 years. He was formerly a credentialed special ed teacher from Massachusetts, clinical director and former board certified behavior analyst, BCABA, though he's not currently certified. He has led non-public agencies providing ABA services. He's been involved and led multiple non-public school programs, promotes inclusive practices, and has been a special education family advocate and consultant. Michael is currently a board member of the Alameda County Developmental Disabilities Council and co-chair of the East Bay Legislative Coalition for Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And Michael, do you want me to share your slides, or are you planning to share them yourself?
I can share them, Sherry. It's all good. And so that's no problem. I'm happy to share them. Thank you for inviting me to today's discussion. I really want to applaud and appreciate the comments from my colleagues and other panelists. I think my piece will be a little bit briefer, so we can give some time for questions. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have questions. So as I share my screen, I just want to kind of point out a couple of things. First off, I want to kind of, I think it's important to underscore a point that Audrey and Jan both made, as we have a lot of families that are on this call. I think first off, I think it's really important to note that it's never too early to start discussing or kind of preparing for that. And I know that can be overwhelming for families as they move through life with their child. But if you're looking at things for the future, you're looking at things for like what's next, it's important to kind of understand kind of what the possibilities are, not just for the abilities of your child, but what are the range of possibilities that are out there service-wise. So I just wanted to point that out before I get into my little spiel. And again, I'm going to go pretty quickly through the slides that I know Sherry is going to provide for those attendees here. So as I go forward, I think the first thing that I want to note is kind of who we are at Alacasta. We consider ourselves and are recognized in the East Bay as an industry leader in transition education. We're a team of professional educators and advocates for disability justice. And And we stand for the equal inclusion of people with IDD in community life. And so part of our purpose in the types of programming we offer, and not just for transition services, but is that we want to empower and prepare our participants for life what's after school. And the way that we look at that is, again, the philosophic approach to service that extends beyond the continuation of services, but the evolution of what service is for people who have differing and varying support needs. So as we move forward here, the kind of things that we teach or that we kind of center on are a lot of the areas that were highlighted by the other speakers. And we primarily look at things through the lens of self-determination, self-advocacy, ILS skills, and pre-vocational development. And incorporating that is also a transportation component that includes travel training. And so I'll touch on a little bit of that stuff as we move forward. I think the most important thing to kind of look at, and I don't think this has been highlighted enough by my predecessors in today's discussion, is, again, what are we looking in terms of neurodiversity and neurodivergence? It's important that we're looking through the lens of nothing that needs to be fixed or that somebody is suffering, with that there's difference, and that we need to find those kind of accommodations where, and that's when you're looking at it through the lens of IDEA or ADA or whatever. How do we find on ways to be strength-based, to look at how somebody learns, how they best kind of operate, and what are the types of ways that we can try to ease their movement into a world that is slow to recognize these differences. And so I kind of want to just kind of highlight that in the slide that this is, which is basically the definition of neurodiversity and what the neurodiversity model of education is. And that's something that's been shared on an international level as we look through the lens of what adult services would look like post-secondary for students. So, which brings us to our philosophy, which is a neurodiversity model. And if you look, you've probably seen slides that are similar to this. Basically, our view is that the community belongs to all of us. And all of us have a right to those spaces, and we should have the ability to kind of facilitate the immersion of that for all the people that we support, or the people who ask us to go with them on their journeys. And so part of that is that we need to kind of break through the notion of how that's done. And we do that in a more immersive, integrative way, where we have kind of something that I think is a little bit harder as you move away from kind of educationally based kind of programming, is how do you subscribe to a dignity of risk? How do you give an opportunity for people to go ahead and learn in natural situations and be in a support structure? And that's sort of the impetus in which we provide our supports and training. And I think it's also noteworthy to state that the programs that I'm talking about with respect to transition and adult services are offered through, like as Sherry had mentioned, we are a service option for Berkeley Unified School District students. And we also have an adult program where we take folks in that are over 22 and adopt this model of service. So what we do with that model of service is focus on individual strengths, respecting individual uniqueness, and obviously try to use kind of ambition and dreams as a way to kind of put them on a trajectory that is person-centered. And through that, we develop goals and individualized kind of pathways that align with these kind of ideologies, right? The idea of self-determination, which is about empowerment and agency. So these are a variety of skills that you can do or you could work on in order to become more self-determined. So that's choice making, informed decision making, problem solving, regulation, advocacy, awareness, efficacy, all the things that our colleagues have talked about tonight. The other thing that we want to make sure is that we're looking at things through a person-centered lens. And although we do, through Berkeley Unified, we have a credentialed teacher that oversees our program, our instructors are facilitators of what they are, and they're out there in the community every day with our folks. So basically, we want to make sure that people are treated as adults and that they are basically given opportunities to kind of navigate the world in a supportive environment, but in a way that allows them to go ahead and make those choices and see what the repercussions of those choices are. Here's a kind of idea about what a day at ACAT or ACT is. Forgive the nomenclature, the terminology is really kind of a little bit off-putting, but so ACAT is technically the program that's associated with Berkeley Unified School District. We have a number of students that we serve as through the IEP process, where we are considered the offer of FAPE, and we are then responsible for meeting the IEP goals and objectives. So for those folks that are kind of walking into the ITP process or the transition planning process, you know, our program serves those BUSD students who are 18 to 22, and then our adult program takes over from there. And so basically those are our program hours, and then our ratios, which we're a 1-to-3 ratio, 1 staff member for 3 students. So at ACAT or ACT, either one, we do vocational training. We have partnerships with the people that are, or the organizations that are listed on this, or we have regular sites where people are going to do some, you know, kind of vocational training, some working on soft skills, working on things that are going to hopefully benefit them or prepare them for what's next in the job marketplace for them. We do travel training all day. We are a purely community-based program. There is no classroom. The world is our classroom. So we are out and about all day from 8:30 to 2:30 every day, and we're utilizing public transportation to do that. Every student that's in our program, both adults and those sort of transition age youth from Berkeley Unified, are navigating the general community and you know, accessing public transportation. We also work on independent living skills, including some self-help stuff and some activities of daily living, including cooking and meal prepping, budgeting, exercise classes if appropriate. And we, again, look at this through the lens of what the IEP is, right? So each individual student has an IEP, and we work with the district and the families and the teams that are associated to create meaningful, challenging, but attainable transition goals. And that we request that our students are given leadership roles during the IEP meetings. I think Audrey had mentioned, you know, at 16 or so is when, you know, people start to get through there and be more participatory in that process, and that's great. I did want to kind of just let people know that there is legislation that's gone through. I think it's through the Assembly Approps side at this point. It's AB 448. Blanca Rubio is the author, where they are looking to lower the age of transitions, access to kind of beginning the transition age process from 16 to 14 here in California. So I just thought I'd share that. And this is the contact information for those who are interested. Certainly speak to the program director, Tanya Caulfield, and learn more about us here. So that concludes my presentation today. Thank you all for having me today.
Thanks, Mike. And I just want to say, you know, from the bottom of my heart to all of the presenters, I know how busy you are, particularly this time of year. So thank you for giving us your Monday evening to share this really important information. I know it's a lot to digest. I just dropped the folder in the chat, and the video will be available on the CAC website. And we're going to start the Q&A. And we're going to start with one of the questions in the chat. And speakers, if you want to field the question, I think the best option would be to raise your hand. So the question is, are we hosed if our kid is about to turn 16 and this is the first we're learning about this transition process? The second part of that question is step 1 to hire an advocate. So let's see, Audrey, I see your hand up.
So it's never too late. I think it's too late if you've accepted a diploma and the child's graduated, or the child's aged out of transition. But I think if at 16, there's still a lot that can be done. It's just really important that you understand the process, because unfortunately, there's been some chatter in the chat. I appreciate that some districts really do their best with knowing all of this stuff, But now that I'm a parent, I actually taught high school for 13 years. I have to think about how to get my son through the rest of his life. So it's a much bigger burden than just getting him to the finish line. So as a parent, we're thinking super long view. Schools are thinking to graduation, right? And so as a parent, you have to know everything that there is to know. I have a guide that we just linked. Sherry just shared it with you, and a course. So the information is there. If mine isn't appealing to you, there's so many transition guides out there. I would recommend that you learn the steps in the process, even if you were to hire an advocate, because this is not going to end at 22. I know that my son, I will be supporting him until I die with supported adulthood, making sure he's getting services and supports because he needs them. I hope that answers the question.
Does anybody else from the panel, Jan, I see you nodding your head. Do you have anything you want to add to that, or?
Oops, sorry about that. I agree. It's never too late. It's much more difficult the later it is, but we would want all parents, all families to have conversations with their child about what they're interested in, certainly around 15, 16, 17, and to be working with their transition team at the school district about what they see as potential outcomes. But, really, I think, what Audrey said is really, really critical. Not all school districts, but frankly, too many are focused on graduating the kid, on getting them to finish either at 18 with a diploma or putting them into an 18 to 22. They finish up at 22 and then, they're off the docket. So it's really important that parents really kind of take this on as their own personal mission, and really help to understand, help to discover, what do you think your child is able to do? What do they want to do? I'm not saying that they should all go to college. Many kids don't want to go to college. We force many kids to college who should not go to college, and guess what? They flunk out. So we have to really understand the kids and understand their potential with appropriate help, and help them on that path, and then drive the transition process themselves. Just as parents and families oftentimes will help drive the IEP, you have to drive the ITP as well, right? You're working, of course, closely with the school district, with all your specialists, but you have to, just like with an IEP, you have to become the subject matter expert in your child.
Audrey, do you have a quick comment?
Yes, I should have said this at the beginning, and usually when I present on transition to parents, this is what I say. The IEPs you create at transition age are the most important IEPs of your child's academic career, because this is where it all comes to fruition or not. And so I think that by the time our kids are 13, 14, 15, we're like, oh, can't we be done with this already, right? Like, we were all throwing up our hands. It's exhausting. Some of us are working. It's a lot. But you really, and that's why I said you have to go back to square one, which is the assessments. I've had kids get new diagnoses at high school age because things were missed, or maybe based on their stated post-secondary goal, we now need to look more closely at their fine motor skills or their hearing or something that's related to this job that they want to have, right? So you have to kind of treat it like you're going back to kindergarten in terms of the process. We need a full assessment. We need to really follow the steps in the process. Parents' voice has to be heard, but so does the student's voice now. That is different. So it is, things change, but it's really about, like, just don't walk away from it. Don't be so scared by it that you don't do anything. Like, dig in and treat it like the most important process, because for right now it's the most important thing.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to go back and forth. So raised hand is next up. Is Erin, your question?
Hi, I have a 12-year-old with an IEP. He's a sixth grader, but we're a military family, so we're looking at possibly moving several times. Does this process translate nationwide? Is there national groups that we should be looking into to know what we need to do wherever we are. That's it.
Thanks, Erin.
Audrey, you want to take?
Yeah, Audrey or someone from DOR would be,
I'll just throw in one quick thing here. So I just met an advocate at COPA this year, the Council of Parent Advocates and Attorneys, who is a military family advocate that is hired by the military to help families because this is so hard when they move around so much. Everything we've talked about today is under federal law. So it applies everywhere. And if you write a good IEP in one district and you move to another, it depends on state and some district regulations, but generally they will start with the IEP you left your old district with. There might be some pushback, but yes. And if you email me, my email's in the chat, I will get you the name of that advocate. I'm going to have to dig through my notes for that.
Okay, thank you. And also, when you move, I know when we moved from elementary to middle school, we had a transition meeting with both people from both schools. Is that a possible thing to do across state lines, or is it something that we only do within like our district and stuff like that?
So Erin, hi, this is Mike. I've worked in other states before. I think the important thing to know, and this is, as Audrey pointed out, these are all federal type of kind of universality. As a parent, you can request anybody from anywhere to join any meeting that you want. You have the right to ask for anybody that you want, the garbage collector, you know, people from 25 different states, an alien from Mars, anybody that you want to be a participant in your team, you can request. It will require a little more coordination if you're going out of state, obviously. But I'm saying that you can ask for anybody that you want to be an active participant in your child's planning session. So just know that's the case, and that as Audrey pointed out correctly, anybody who comes into another school district, doesn't matter if it's the same state or if you're going cross country, the incoming school district has a responsibility to determine whether or not they can meet the needs of your child with respect to the services that are offered in that document, or find something that is equivalent to that. So that is kind of your saving grace in terms of like easing your kind of any consternation you may have about moving into a new place. Now that, to be fair, not every school district will have all the resources or the capacity to perform what's in the current IEP. But that's your blueprint to start from. And from an advocacy perspective, you can use that to move into whatever you feel is the most appropriate match for what's available in that region, area, state, country, county, whatever.
thanks, Mike.
Erin, this is Dell. I'm sorry, Sharon. From the,
I saw you unmuted before. I wanted to give you a chance to answer.
thank you so much. And if you're moving to another state, vocational rehabilitation service entities are federal in nature. They're all over the place. So Voc Rehab, Department of Rehabilitation is who we are in California. But if you move to Hawaii, or if you move to Washington State, Tennessee, Alabama, service delivery and the philosophy may be a little different in some other states, but they are everywhere. So you would be able to have access and have your son or daughter be involved with Voc Rehab services at the right time.
Great, thank you, Della. I want to follow up with you with a question from the chat, which you answered, but I want to have it asked for the whole group. And the question was, is the DOR an alternative track to college, i.e. is it inappropriate for college-bound kids, or is it only for non-college bound kids? Is it only meant for students who are ready to enter the workforce full-time? And I want to give you a chance to answer that because it's such an important question. I think there's a lot of misconception around DOR.
I agree. And to the parent or parents who put this in the chat and all the providers here, we are such an individualized, unique to the student and their need entity. It is so hard to quantify with an answer, that specific question for each specific child. Your student may graduate high school and decide they want to go get a job. They need work. They need work experience and they want to go to their local community college. Okay, well, let's do this. They have some learning, cognitive, whatever the issues are. They want to get a part-time job and they want to go to school. They should talk to their counselor about a hybrid plan that includes the 2 years at Marin City College and the 1.5 years that they're going to have working for this particular company, because it's a company, a new tech company, and they're going to be doing clerical work and do something else afterward. It's such a variety of options for your students and their interests. It is not an alternative. It's an inclusive conversation, an inclusive plan that you would develop. Our plans are called individualized employment plans. It's individual to the person and their vocational goals. Those vocational goals are going to be different for every student. Some may get out, go right. I think our presenter Audrey talked about her son went right into a 4-year school. Wonderful. Some students aren't ready. They go to community college and then they transfer into a 4-year school. Some go on to get master's degrees, or some decide, I think I want to be a welder, and we try to get them involved in an apprenticeship program. So there's a multiplicity of possibilities. I urge you to contact your local DOR entity to have some more conversation, informational interview for your student or with your student who has some interest.
Audrey, do you have something really quick to add?
Yeah, so my son is a DOR client, and he's had a lot of really great things happen and then like not receiving certain things. So he is, DOR is paying for part of his college tuition. They paid for his computer because of his print and visual and motor disabilities, like his assistive technology. There was some pushback about providing pre-ETS and all the services that you described in beautiful detail, Leslie. I wished my son had accessed that, but because he was placed in an NPS and there was no program and it just never happened. So we had to really go back and forth. Now that he's out of college, it's like regional center and DOR are like, no, you're paying for it. No, you're paying for it. And we had a little spat about that. We now have a referral to an appropriate agency that's going to serve him, but it has not been easy. So I'm grateful for the financial support for the tuition and the computer, but the training that he really needs, he has never had paid employment ever. So we really need to have that support. So if you're not getting it, like for the parents here, you know, we talk about advocates for the IEP process. You have to advocate with every single agency in adulthood, which is why I say it's supported adulthood, because you are the resource teacher in adulthood for every single agency your child is going to be connected with. My son is Regional Center, IHSS, DOR, SSI, visually, and Lighthouse for the Blind, everything, and it's all on me. So just some thoughts there.
Thanks, Audrey. Okay, another question, Anna Johnson.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to quickly address one of the comments that was in the chat by a district staff member who is disappointed by the negative portrayal of districts. I didn't find that as part of the presentations. And as a parent, I just really appreciate the plain spoken, non-whitewashing communication that this presentation and this webinar was designed for. CAC is for parents. I see you, I'm with you. And I'm very appreciative of that. And it doesn't even compare whatever disappointment that person chose to write about, that a parent feels when the systems, whatever system, banking, health, school, whatever, discriminates against their students with disabilities. Not even comparable. Okay, I do have questions. So I was really intrigued by the 10th grade reading thing for health and medical, which definitely applies to our family. And but I noticed from the assessments that's usually it doesn't delineate between nonfiction and fiction. And so I'm maybe too technical, but is there a way to delineate that during the transition assessment? And then the second piece is, do you have a list of transition assessments, like the names of them? Because that, and I don't know if it was in one of the presentations and I missed it, but I would love to see a list of the actual names of the transition assessments. Thank you.
So Jan, can you answer part one about the reading? And then Audrey, can you address this list of assessments? Because I know you have one somewhere.
Sure. So it's kind of a hard question to answer. There are ways that you can definitely, and I'm not an assessment guru like Audrey is, there's definitely ways that you can understand how well your child is reading in terms of vocabulary and fluidity, and what their comprehension is, right? So those are all really good indicators. The other thing to note is every school district uses different assessments. Oftentimes they do not list the age or grade level equivalency. They will just say below, well below, et cetera. And I want to know the age or grade level equivalency. I always ask for those because and again, not to inflame anyone, but oftentimes we see kids who graduate from class, grade to grade, grade to grade. They're in 12th grade and they passed all of their classes. They have all of their credits, but they're still at second or third grade level, in English. And you have to wonder, well, how did they pass all these classes if they're still this far behind, right? So, it's really important. And I agree with Audrey. I believe that at 17 or 18, all kids need to be reassessed because they need that assessment for workplace accommodations and for disability resource centers in college. But things get missed, right? A central auditory processing disorder has been hugely underdiagnosed and it's hugely impactful in the workplace. So, anyway, you have to ask for, tell me how well this kid's really understanding the information. Audrey, do you have any specifics that you would recommend?
So I have an assessment spreadsheet that I can't find the link for right now, but I'll get it to you. If you go to the Pediatric Epilepsy Surgery Alliance website, you can probably find it there. It's linked through there. I'm just not able to pull it up right now. And I do have a slideshow that I did that showed all the functional vocational evaluation, not all, but like a smattering of them because there are many. I think the key point with assessments to remember is who decides what assessment needs to be done? What do you guys think? Who would make that decision? The team, the IEP team. Who's on the IEP team? The parent and the student. Now the student at transition age. So the student has a medical condition and needs to manage her own medication, but she's reading at a 5th grade level. So you now need to assess her ability to manage her own healthcare. There are healthcare assessments. I have a whole training on healthcare assessments and healthcare transition in the course, which I linked in I think it's in the link, the links Sherry provided, and it's in the chat. So the district doesn't just say, here, this is what we're doing for the assessment, although that is what they do most of the time, unfortunately. No offense to any district that's doing it right, but just saying that mostly I see this is what we're doing and this is the transition assessment. So you're asking the question, how is this appropriate to my child and how does it address their stated post-secondary interests, wants, needs, desires? Because now the IEP is student-driven at transition age. The law says they have to consider the student's strengths, preferences, and interests. How do you consider those if you don't assess them, right? So you just have to go back to the law. If you don't have the rights law book, go through it and highlight everything that's related to transition, and it's all there. There's no surprises here. I'm not making anything up. It's all in there. So that's my answer.
Thank you.
Okay, there's another question. I think this is going to have to be the last question because we've already gone over time, and I appreciate everybody sticking around. And also, if you have to go, I totally understand. Last question from Yuki Baba: is a transition plan relevant to a child who's severely disabled? My son is not capable of academic or vocational training, and Mike, you answered this in the chat, but I'd like to have you answer to for the recording.
Yeah, sure, Sherry. So thank you for the question. Yes, I don't know how else to put it. An ITP is relevant to every single child, regardless of their support needs, regardless of their ambitions, their abilities. It's a really important facet. And as someone who operates adult services as well, because my organization does adult services, We often, when we're going through an intake process, will take a look at the types of things that students were accessing as youth, as before they entered into the adult services world. So, and I think the last thing I'll say about this is it's really important that you do an ITP for something that Jan said that I wanted to echo, which is you cannot assume, in fact, I can guarantee you that the level of accommodation, services, and supports that you got in the special education arena does not exist in adult services. So if you're not able to kind of project what supports your son or your daughter may benefit most from, and don't have that kind of codified in the ITP, it'll be very challenging for you to navigate a variety of different areas post secondary. So.
Thank you, Mike. Caroline, do you have something to add to this, or are you here to wrap things up or ask a question? Because we are over time and I want to.
Super fast, just to pick up on where Mike left off. I think there's a question in the chat related to ITP and charter schools. Are charter schools also obligated to provide the ITP?
Yes. If they have an IEP and they're operating in a charter school, they are required to follow all federal guidelines with respect to accessing IDEA, including an IEP and ITP and all the I documents.
Audrey, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, there's a comment in the chat about our child's about to graduate from high school. Who do we talk to about reviewing the IEP? You're going to have a very hard time finding an advocate in the month of May. You can just refuse the diploma if you feel that your child's academic and functional needs were not addressed, or if there was no transition planning. So if they never did any transition planning, you can reject the diploma. Your student can still walk with their classmates, and then you sit down with the district and say, what can we do? Because this didn't happen, and we're at the finish line, and we need to figure something out. That would be my recommendation.
But let the kid walk. That's super important. Don't make the kids suffer because you didn't have the appropriate things in place, because we don't want the kid to feel bad. That's perfect.
Great. That's a perfect place to end. Thank you so much. So it will take a couple of days for the recording to be uploaded, but it will be on the CAC website, which is hosted by the North Region SELPA website. And I know I'm hearing it, I'm feeling it. This is a topic that we'll revisit. We'll come back to it next year. We'll have different presenters, same presenters. We'll reach out to the districts for their participation, and we'll keep talking about this. This is an area that is critical. We spend so much time building these IEPs, and then we get to high school and we have to start moving kids towards independence. What does that look like? It doesn't look like scaffolding for writing. It doesn't look like a one-to-one aid to be able to make transitions. So we'll keep talking about this. This is a popular topic. It's not going away. Okay. If you scroll back